Lucy Gray, thank you. Let's go to Melbourne now. Joining us is the Shadow Home Affairs and Cyber Security Minister, James Patterson. James, good to see you. I had the Treasurer on a short time ago. Inflation, thankfully, dropping, but price pressures still remain. The Treasurer says the policies are working. So what do you put it down to?
Well, good morning, Pete. Frankly, I think the Treasurer celebrating is a bit premature because if you look closely at the numbers, it's certainly true that headline inflation has come down by 1%. But core inflation, those things that actually really affect household budgets on a month-to-month basis, has only come down by 0.1%. One of the big drivers for the headline inflation number coming down is, for example, holidays, which have declined in costs significantly. Now, that's very welcome, but is it going to help a family pay their rising mortgage costs or their increasing rent bill or their increasing electricity prices? No, it's not. And so really the preemptive victory lap that the Treasurer was on this morning, I think, is very premature and frankly out of touch with the very significant price pressures that Australians are facing.
Yeah, I put this question to him as well and he squibbed it about childcare next week. The subsidies do come into effect, but childcare centres are just increasing their fees. They've obviously got price pressures as well. Is that an example, in your view, of a wage price spiral?
Well, it could be that, but it also is often what we see, Pete, when the federal government increases subsidies for something, that the operators increase their prices to accommodate that increased subsidy. And the federal government has been warned that this is a risk, so they'll have no excuse if it eventuates. What they have to deliver is what they promised to deliver, which is actually reduced childcare costs for families. If that doesn't eventuate, then families will be rightly angry that they have been let down by Labor yet again on a core cost of living issue.
He's now got a bigger surplus to work with without pointing to the exact figure. He says that's down the track. But is he right to bank the savings, James, or should more help be provided to folks at home?
Well, certainly the government needs to do everything they can to help Australians with cost of living, but the best thing they could do is get inflation under control, and they've frankly shown very little interest in that task. They seem to think that that's the Reserve Bank's job and not their job, because they've added $185 billion of extra spending since they came to office, and every single one of those dollars contributes to higher inflation and higher cost of living. And the longer that persists, that means the higher interest rates have to go, and the longer they have to stay high to get inflation under control. So really, they shouldn't be adding any extra fuel to that fire.
Couple of other quick stories here that caught my eye this morning, James, before we go. The ACT government is pushing to allow teenagers from as young as 14 to access euthanasia. Have you got a thought on this?
Look, Pete, I'm instinctively uncomfortable with that. I voted against allowing the ACT to legislate for euthanasia, not because I don't recognise the freedom that some people desire to control the timing of the end of their life, but because I believe that euthanasia can never be made completely safe. And one wrongful death under a euthanasia scheme, in my view, is one too many. Of course, the risks of that increase the lower age you get to and the more vulnerable people that are involved. And I would hate to think of a young person being put to death wrongfully under a euthanasia scheme as a result of ACT's changes. And frankly, I think it is insensitive timing when they're also trying to take over a Catholic hospital, Cavalry Hospital, in the ACT, who's of course opposed to euthanasia.
The minister responsible says, I mean, the rest of the country, the minimum age is 18, but the minister responsible says the age is arbitrary. What's your view on that?
Well, I mean, if 14 was too young for Daniel Andrews, who's got the most extreme euthanasia laws in the country, I don't understand why the ACT feels that it needs to go even further than he has. And I really regret that what will happen here is, if this is legislated, that in a few years' time we will find out about a teenager who was put to death under this scheme wrongfully, and we will all be very harshly judged for allowing that to happen.
Just a final one here, separate from this, James. This is all ahead of the Labor National Conference coming up. A couple of, the left flank of the Labor Party is putting pressure on the Prime Minister to move more in that direction, i.e. shutting down Nauru. Your thoughts on that?
The Labor Party and the Minister for Home Affairs are clearly under massive pressure from the left on border protection, and unfortunately I think they're giving into that pressure. We know they'd already removed one of the key pillars of Operation Sovereign Borders, which is temporary protection visas, and the Minister is out there now trashing the second pillar of Operation Sovereign Borders, which is offshore processing, calling it a festering sore, rather than recognising it as the very effective deterrent that it has been to stopping the boats. Soon we could be in a scenario where the only remaining successful measure from OSB, which is in place place is boat turnaround, something, of course, that Labor said in opposition that we couldn't do, but we did successfully do, and it did stop the votes. And I just really fear that we are going to get into a world again where the boats start coming and innocent lives are put at risk at sea, as we know they tragically were under the last Labor government.
James Patterson, good to see you. We'll talk to you again soon.